You can find them on Twitter, you can find them on the gram. After listening to their podcast, you'll be sitting there like, damn, taking their teaching from one level to the next, reaching up to Canada and down
school years.
to Mexico.
This episode's going to air when
Right
I guess
before.
schools are beginning, or just before. So what would you say are some of the lessons that you picked up on for remote learning?
So I have to say, first, my professional development courses that I do are all online. They're 100% online. So I've been doing that for about 5 years, 6 years. And then I am a people person, but I love discussions with my students. I adore my students, even the tough ones, right? So the idea of moving from my high school class to online, even though I was used to teaching online and offering feedback to adults online, it was a really hard time for me as a high school teacher, especially because I consider our course to be discussion based. Like all my assessments, my number one assessment is through discussion. And I think it's like the ultimate life skill, like that's why we're in class, right? So if nothing else from remote learning, really being able to see the value and joy in the classroom environment and being with people and having discussions. We sit here, we're kind of getting used to it now through a Zoom or through a Meet, but it's really different to be talking about topics that are so important to discuss, especially right now, right? And topics that are so important to us as a country and as a global community are so important to us personally and important to our soul. That's hard to do through a Hangout or through a Zoom, and not to be able to read someone's energy and someone's body language and really have that sense of community when you don't have everyone in one space. So that was something that one of the first things that my students said that they realized was how much they missed being in that room and having those discussions. And it is a special thing. And one student did get back and they're like, I just realized that we don't get to finish it. We don't get to finish these discussions that we've started together. And I was like, it breaks my heart, but I came to that realization a lot earlier than you did, and I understand. So for me, that is number one, that school is a place where discussions happen. And that's like that training ground for the type of world we want to have.
Right.
Or it can be that way, right? School can be that way. I think that's one thing. But I think it's really pushed a lot of people to really consider what their assessments are. If you can't have a quiz and you can't have a test and you can't have a discussion, what are you about? And what are you going to ask the students to do? So I think those are conversations worth having. The whole, I don't know if it was nationwide, but at least California, that was great. Our grading system was a no harm grading system. Did you guys have that?
I've never heard it called. I mean, we did pass fail, like it was just strictly pass fail.
Yeah, and so for us it was there, but there was a phrase that we used here in California of a do no harm grading system, and it made me go, I like that we prefer that we not harm people, but the fact that our old grading system would be the harmful one.
Right. Well, that's what's implied, right? If this is do no harm, the other one causes some kind of
harm.
Right.
And it's like, wait, I have a real problem with. Okay, I'm glad that we've brought this up. Can we pull at this a little bit? So, really talking about grading systems, really talking about what our purpose is as educators. The idea that some of our practices are harmful.
Right.
Intentionally, unintentionally, and other things like, we knew that these were problems before COVID. We knew that there were problems. And then as soon as we go into this pandemic, experience for education, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, these are real problems that we need to solve right away. And it's like, what, if we had just solved them when we realized the problem, we would have been fine by now.
So are you talking about like disparity?
Yeah, the
You know, like,
digital divide,
yeah,
the disparity even between courses or sites or within the district. But anything where you're like, the kids don't have food during the summer or the winter break.
Right.
And so we kind of help out there. But what happens if, or all of those, yes, getting technology into the hands of students, the fact that our students don't have Wi-Fi, why is Wi-Fi not a right, like water or electricity? And there are, of course, places in our country where that's not, doesn't seem to be a right.
That's
either.
not, either. Yeah.
So it's like, look, if we can identify that the problem exists, instead of waiting until it's exacerbated, why don't we just fix it?
Right.
We have smart people.
Right.
Excuse me. So lots of little lessons, I think, but then also just the bringing up of these topics.
Well, I think one of the ones that I think when we talked to Laura Spencer that Cheer brought up that we, agree, if you're getting rid of state testing, are you saying it's not that important?
Right.
So like, what about all the finances that go into state testing? How could that be reallocated for things like Wi-Fi or devices or food? I mean, for sure.
And it's the same thing with grades. We don't need letter grades all of a sudden.
Right.
That was quick.
Right.
So if I find it fascinating, and I hope that the conversations continue, that we don't go back to normal. Like we keep talking about when we go back to normal. It's like, cool, I'm fine with, I want to go back to normal too. I want to see my students,
Right. Well, when you say go back to normal, you want to go back to the classroom.
In a classroom.
Yes.
That's the normal you want.
Yes. And I think but the fact when we start bringing them all into the topic of back to normal, I don't want to go back to normal. No. I want to go back to my class.
Right.
Thanks for listening to the Teacher Nerds podcast. Keep up with every new episode by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, or anywhere you listen. Remember to visit teachernerds.com, and that's nerds with a Z. Follow us on Twitter @TeacherNerds and on Instagram @TeacherNerdsPodcast. And thank you for being one of the Teacher Nerds.